Okay.
Guys, let's just combine the situation here. I want you to talk freely about what you're thinking about fintechs in 2025. I want to be a very relaxed conversation. But first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience. Just a quick introduction and a few words about what you see is going to happen in 2025 in fintech companies. I would like to introduce Gabriela first, please.
Well, hello, I'm Gabriela Ruggeri, managing partner at Kamay Ventures. We're a multi-corporate fund. We invest all along the value chain of the CPG world, and particularly around fintech. What we see or what we look for is anything that can boost and develop the digitalization within the SMBs and sort of what's the traditional channel, the small stores, which in Latin America make up sort of the fabric of the Latin American region and ecosystem. We have over 12 million points of sale that require and that would need more digitalization, financial inclusion in general, access to credit, access to ways to finance and do all the administration of their operations far more efficiently than they can. And what we look for is anything that has to do with payments and financing in that space. So that's more or less what we do.
Good. Juan Pablo, want to go forward?
Yes, so I'm Juan Pablo Ortega. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Yuno. Yuno is a payment orchestrator. We basically help companies around the world accept all the different local payment methods, and we also help them process payments globally, helping them increase approval rate, helping them lower the cost of processing, and also helping them reduce fraud. I think 2025 is going to be a great year for fintech. Number one, we're seeing more openness in terms of regulations. Central banks are opening up avenues for new companies to start offering fintech services. Second, you have an increase in technology in the infrastructure side. Things like what we're doing at Yuno, offering a single API so that fintechs can have an easy way to be able to do pay-ins and payouts. You also have different technology companies helping fintechs issue credit cards, process credit cards. So this is a great opportunity for the fintechs to be able to focus in their core and letting those other providers help. And then finally, I know people believe that right now we're in a slow moment for venture capital, but I do believe that investors are eager to invest in companies that are changing the world, and I think fintech is one of the best spaces to do that.
Good. Michael, please introduce yourself.
So my name is Michael Schlein. I'm the CEO of Axion. We're a global nonprofit dedicated to creating a financially inclusive world. 2 billion people are left out of and poorly served by the global financial system. We're trying to change that. We grew up in microfinance, and in the last decade or so, we're a very active early stage investor in fintechs, trying to reach people who've been left out. In terms of trends, the PIX revolution happening here in Brazil is really part of a much larger global revolution. Digital public infrastructure where governments are building out fast real-time payments linked to biometric IDs is transformational. It'll allow us to reach people we've never been able to reach before. So though venture capital is certainly recovering and from a certain euphoria, I do think we're at the beginning of a much longer trend that is going in the right direction.
Very interesting. I want to pick up this point brought by Michael. I think most of us here are Brazilians, do business here in Brazil. And I would like you to assess the Latin American ecosystem of fintechs, and particularly the Brazilian ecosystem. What are the challenges that we face in terms of technology, in terms of penetration of these fintech ecosystems, and also what are the opportunities ahead, especially in 2025? Please go ahead, Gabriela.
Well, I believe that in Latin America in general, and particularly also in Brazil, there's a lot of opportunities. Certain improvements or certain structures enable, like you were saying in the case of PICS, that they were enabled by the government and therefore are widely spread, open the possibility for a lot more financial products into not only individuals but also into SMBs. Small companies are, again, the fabric of Latin America, small and medium companies. And what I believe that we can now, through these networks and through a lot of the opportunities that arise from the distribution channels of, for example, companies like CPGs or others that reach all the geographies in the Latin American countries. They go from one corner in a country or the north of the country to the south, east to west, and they cover it completely. We can use those networks to reach more people with financial products and the ability of using new technologies such as what AI is offering in terms of alternative scoring, or what's offering in terms of ease of products plugged into these networks is very interesting. And I believe that then on sort of the payments world, we're going to see a lot of opportunities linked to how do we make payments easy and available into those remote places or in highly congested situations where transactions cannot happen or they don't happen easily. And enabling that enables the consumption and sort of the economic activity of an area, of a small town, of a small area that will provide a lot more opportunities for other businesses and other things to develop in that inclusion. And we see that particularly as the most interesting, and anything that has to do with also the security and the certification of algorithms and the certification of biometric identification, so that there's more security in the process, so people feel more inclined to have this adoption. That's
if I could, just picking up on exactly those themes. So PICS is the fastest growing payment system in the world.
Is it?
Absolutely. And it's really, just the last couple of years. And already a third of the transactions in Brazil are happening on
There's
PICS.
a long way to go to increase.
Now, it's the fastest growing. The biggest in the world is UPI, which is India's version. And UPI is, this is an amazing statistic. UPI is 40% of the world's transactions, not just India.
So it's
India's
40.
40% of the world's transactions are happening on UPI. So just these two alone, and these two are really the models for the rest of the world, but there is an enormous digital revolution, and 100 countries at the last UN General Assembly signed on to some version of digital public infrastructure. So this is just beginning, and I do think Brazil has really led the way. Also, you mentioned leveraging the networks of consumer goods companies into very remote areas. This is a big trend that we're very excited about. In the world of financial inclusion for people who've been left out, it used to be that the transaction sizes were too small to be commercially viable. Now there's no such thing. It used to be the distances were too far. Now there's no distance that's not insurmountable. It used to be hard to know your client, but now with data and data analytics, we can know our client. So this is still just early days. And it used to be that you had to go to a financial service company to get financial services, whether it was a bank, a microfinance institution, or even a fintech. But today, we're and this is just beginning. This is one of the trends we're most excited about.
Is that your perspective as well, Juan Pablo?
Yeah, so I think you have the good side, which is what you mentioned, the growth of PICS, etc. The reality is that if you look at Mexico, 80% of transactions are still in cash. Most of the population don't have a bank account, and if they have it, they don't really use it. So it's great to see what is happening in Brazil. It's great to see what is happening in India. And India is a really particular case because UPI and the end of cash in India was forced by the government. So we see that if the government wants to implement and they want to digitalize commerce and payments, they can do it. And India is an amazing example. But we don't actually see governments in Latin America wanting to do that. So it's up to the fintechs and these different companies to create the technologies and the services to actually serve everyone. A big change that we're seeing today is that before, well, banks were the ones basically providing financial services. And what we're seeing is a trend where all the different companies, so Rappi, they have a financial services arm, they have a bank, and
they're
in
becoming
Mexico,
banks. Everybody's becoming banks
so it's
nowadays.
like every single consumer company is becoming a bank. If you look in Mexico, another amazing example is Oxxo. Oxxo is the biggest convenience store. And they now have a financial services branch, and they're one of the biggest banks or financial service providers in Mexico. So I do believe that the trend is helping. We need more regulation. We need less regulation or more clear regulation for fintechs to do things in countries like Colombia, Peru, Chile, where it's still not that clear how you're able to provide financial services through applications and through different mediums. And I think the opportunity is there. We just need more help, more infrastructure, but it's definitely going in the right direction.
But what kind of help would you need, guys, here in Latin America?
I believe that, yes, we need it's good that the governments are doing that and that they have done this in Brazil or in India, but I'm not sure it necessarily will happen everywhere or at what pace it will happen everywhere. What I see as this trend, and we look at it particularly because it has to do with our own investors, which are primarily CPGs, is that they have been and are the players that actually reach every point, but they don't do fintech. They're not fintechs.
Right.
Okay.
So the fact that you have these solutions, and we are looking at companies that can do lending as a service, alternative scoring, empowered by different things, different alternatives of payments that will, and I'm repeating myself, but it's not about, I think there's going to be a lot of trend in solution, but what I would like to reverse in these trends is more the adoption and how we crack the adoption for this region overall, and how creative are the ways to generate that adoption rather than, we have a lot of technology, and technology is far ahead of the adoption of realities in the market. It's true. You have some markets where 80% of the transactions are in cash, but pre-pandemic, how much of those transactions were in cash and how much of those transactions are in cash now? And the evolution is quite impressive. And e-commerce is not going backwards, and that's one thing. But at the same time, how are the different stores and different communities getting their services? And that, I think, the humanizing of that intelligence and the services, and making fintech available not for the savvy people, but actually solutions that can alter the reality of people in different places, is where I expect to see the improvements, and I think where the winners are going to come from. Because this is a 600 million people market. Latin America has 600 million people. And today, over 60% are outside of the financial markets and financial products. So it's not about the sophistication of the financial product itself, for me, to be honest, but actually how we bridge that gap and actually generate that adoption, which will make the difference.
I think this is a good point to introduce the AI conversation to this panel because, we do have a gap already here in Latin America, and I think the AI coming in, the gap might widen, or maybe it can get smaller, depending on how we adopt AI and how we educate ourselves to use AI. And I would like you to comment, to analyze what are actually the opportunities brought by AI in the fintech ecosystem here in Latin America, and where are the gaps?
And something really quick, before we move into AI, something that I think is peculiar well, it's not really only Latam, but in general, you have two situations on how adoption happens. One could be with the government, and you see that in Brazil with PIX, you see that in India with UPI, but then we're also seeing that fintechs are becoming that kind of go-to solution for everyone. A good example is in Peru, you have Yape, and Yape became the way of people paying, the way to do P2P. In Colombia, you have different wallets like Neki that have become. So it doesn't, I don't think you need the government to do something for the fintech revolution to happen or for actually bancarization to happen. There is an opportunity for fintechs to actually become the way
the provider
of digital payments.
Yep. So I just want to make a distinction. AI has been around for more than a dozen years, and almost all of the companies that we invest in use data, data analytics, artificial intelligence. The revolution is generative AI, and I think that's very, very exciting. So all of a sudden, language and replication is just geometrically advanced. And so imagine this. So of those 2 billion people who are left out, 2/3 of them are smallholder farmers. Imagine using generative AI for a very small single 1-acre farm. All of a sudden you can have crop-specific advice, soil conditions for that farm, cloud coverage, local incentives, government incentives for those crops, and then you can provide working capital all on an app. All of that is now doable with generative AI. Now, that's the good side. Here's the bad side.
Yep.
All of these algorithms are enormously powerful, but they can be biased. And they can bring people in, but they can also leave people out. Generally speaking, a lot of the companies we invest in use how you use your phone as a proxy for are you likely to repay. If you top up your phone and if you recharge your phone, you're more likely to repay than someone that always is running out. Makes a lot of sense except for one thing. Men have their own phone, women have the family phone. Women's phones systematically run out of power and money, so we are designing algorithms that systematically discriminate against women. We have to get better. We need government regulation to help us get better. But again, we have to figure this stuff out. It's early days.
Yeah. But how are you addressing these problems at Axionomy? Are you helping your
We're a very active early-stage investor in these companies. We also have a think tank called the Center for Financial Inclusion. They just did a great... They're the ones who are doing a lot of research on bias inherent in algorithms. But they just came out with a tool that is a tool for investors. When you're doing due diligence, before you write that check, here are the dozen questions that you really need to ask. We don't necessarily know the answer, but at least we're helping people get to the right questions.
Definitely. Gabriela, are you doing similar projects at EMI?
We are, we look at both within the value chain that we look at primarily as our thesis. We look at both ends, and in both ends you find the weakest link that is the one that we want to empower and that we want to develop. On the producer side, as Matthew was saying, it happens, you see it a lot, but the reality of small producers is very complex in terms of what they can use their phone for and what they charge it really for, and how many services can actually go through one system versus how many services can go through the actual system. Because for years we developed a ton of apps, and we're all very familiar with the app stores, but prepaid phones can barely use things on the app store, so they can't. And you have to, and you still have that of all phones in Latin America, still about 75 to 78%, depending on the country, are prepaid phones.
Okay.
So the reality is that those phones can use a very small set of features and applications within that phone that will enable them to do that. So what we're looking, again, the technology is there. It's how we make it available. So we look at that. We look at also on the small stores, and that's a curious one in terms of gender that you were saying, because 62% of the mom and pop stores in Latin America are women managed.
Absolutely.
So, and you found that the best reliability in terms of credit payment comes from women. They have a far better credit score
Absolutely.
than men do.
And when you help a woman, you're helping a whole family.
Exactly.
Is
In
that-
seen
India,
that
I've
over
seen
and
it
over.
also. It's
Exactly.
very interesting. So what you see is that you empower, and that sort of filters through. I'm not trying to say men are irresponsible, but in the credit score speaks for itself when you look at
Okay.
that. But you see a lot of opportunities, and we're working with different proofs of concept with a couple of companies we invested, and the companies that we invested in have already assigned over 500,000 credits to small store owners. So in the last, I think it's 6 months, if I'm not mistaken.
it's a
So
lot of money, yeah.
it looks very promising.
Yeah, promising,
So
yeah.
we're very
Pablo?
happy.
Yeah, I think I see two sides. In one side, we're using generative AI and different AI applications to be more efficient, to do things faster. But the reality is that for fintechs, one of the biggest issues that we face is fraud. And for consumer-facing apps, when we launched RappiPay and RappiBank, the biggest issue was identity fraud. And unfortunately, AI is making this problem much bigger. With deepfakes, you can actually pass KYC solutions that used to work before. So even though it has many opportunities and is helping fintechs grow, unfortunately, we're going to be facing issues in identity theft, in identity fraud, and this is going to be something that we need to work with the governments, we need to work with the different entities to be able to actually solve it. So even though it's going to have many benefits, if you are a consumer-facing fintech, you should definitely be looking out to see how this is going to impact your onboarding process, how this is going to impact your KYC, and I think we are going to need to find a way to do maybe like a cryptographic or somehow a kind of like government issue key or something, so you're able to verify that the person behind the phone is actually you. So many challenges, I would say more than the opportunities that it brings today.
And I think we have time for one more round of discussion about credit. You've talked about a lot of challenges in Latin America in terms of this mom and pop stories that they ain't got money to like invest in their services. Well, the technology is here, but I think we have a problem of credit here in Latin America.
Yeah.
How fintechs and non-profits as well can help address this challenge?
There's no question, and there is a problem here. As much progress as Brazil has made, unsecured credit rates can be 300-400%. It's sort of quite the outlier in the world. And again, I think the Central Bank of Brazil has done a great job of fostering innovation and fostering competition. But those rates are too high,
Yeah,
and we're all waiting to see real competition. The new banks of the world, Creditas, there are some great companies, but I do think their market pressures are weirdly resistant. Also, something like a third of the country has bad marks in their credit bureau. So there's not only technology, but we need education to make sure people are using them responsibly. There's something going on there. That's deeply troubling.
Yeah.
If the credit bureau is essentially excluding people, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think it has to do with financial education. We
Yes.
think that in order to give people credit, we need to just give them money, and the reality is that
Yeah.
to have financial inclusion, you need to have financial education first.
Yeah.
I do think that if we increase the penetration of financial services in Latin America, we're going to be able to grow economically and be a better region, but we need to start with the financial education. And it's an issue that you see, for example, in Mexico. In Mexico, we think that people don't have access to credit, but the reality is that they do, but they have access to unofficial credit. So, for every credit that a bank gives, there is actually 4 credits that are given by
Informal.
different individuals.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
these are credit with like 200, 300% interest.
Yeah.
So these people are maybe borrowing $100, $50.
Yep.
They're paying back 4 times that. But at the end, this is how they're able to fund their business. This is able to do working capital. So there is access to credit, but it's credit that is actually not helping. People are not able to repay. And it needs to start with financial education. I think banks and financial services companies and also fintechs forget that we need to start with a financial education as part of the products that we have.
But it's also financial education, but it's got to be built into the products themselves. It's
Correct.
financial education by design. When was the last time you read the instruction manual on your phone?
Yeah.
No.
So you have to design these products
Definitely.
in ways that are intuitive and protect individuals.
Definitely.
100%.
Gabriela.
No, I agree. I would only add, I mean, financial education is crucial, and it definitely has to be inside the products, and because it's the only way people, their day-to-day is too complex. They have a lot of issues. I would only add to that in terms of a larger scale, at the macroeconomic scale, part of the interest rate can also be worked by governments being more diligent and trying to balance their accounts a bit better, and that will generally improve that condition. So there's things that we can do at the microeconomic level, but there's things also that we like to see the economies work at the macro level. I'm speaking in English, but I'm from Argentina, and I would say that that's sort of our key homework. But I think all Latin American countries have to be working on that to complete.
The macroeconomics.
We want, and we know that developed economies run on the ability to have credit, to start new businesses, to do new things, to improve the quality of life of people. And I think all of us are here want the financial inclusion and the digital inclusion, so that the quality of life of people in general in this region can improve. So.
Definitely.
100%.
Guys, it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. We ran out of time, just 40 minutes. If you have something to add to finish our conversation, but I think we're done. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause.
This way.